This video was sponsored by Athletic Greens.
Oh, darn. Hey, Craig, could you hand me that hammer? Dude, just toss it. Dude. That's it. We're building a bridge.
Well, this week on I Don't Know What I'm Doing with Bourbon Moth, we're going to build a bridge from the small tower to the big tower. And because I don't know what I'm doing, when we're all done, I'm going to have my 95-year-old grandma come out and test it. Because I'm not going to be the first one to walk across this thing. So, as you do with any building project, you get on Amazon and you buy a bunch of stuff you think you need. I had eye bolts and turnbuckles and bolts and cable and fasteners and locks and all sorts of stuff. But before I tried that, I decided to just send some string across the span. You know, this string might be strong enough to hold a bridge. Nah, I'm just kidding. We used the string to generally lay out where we wanted our cables to run, so we could figure out how wide we wanted the bridge to be and make sure that our cables were nice and square to one another. So I started hucking string across the void at Craig, and he grabbed it, and using a square and a tape measure, we got it all mapped out. Now, from what I learned online via Google image searches, a common suspension bridge has a couple different things to make it work. It's got some lower cables that the actual treads rest on, and then it's got some upper cables or handrails. Those are fed through some upright posts, and those are tensioned at an angle down into the deck. So first thing we needed to do was cut out some holes in the deck and install some upper rails. So I marked out exactly where each of the 4 upper rails would need to land, and I cut that hole out with a jigsaw. Zip, zap, zoop. I had some nice little squares cut in no time. Next, for our actual rails, posts, whatever you want to call them. For these, I'm using 4x4 pressure-treated Douglas fir to match the aesthetics of the rest of the build so far. But I didn't want them just squared off on the top looking like a hunk of wood. I decided to fancy them up a bit. So just by rotating them around 4 times, once on each side, I cut a 45-degree bevel on the top of each post to give it a nice, wannabe pencil look, I guess. It gives it something, at least. Then, with all 4 of my posts cut, it was time to take them up and insert them through the top of our decking and attach them securely to the actual framework of our deck itself. So I slid each post into the pre-cut hole on either side, and then Craig stood below and I was on the top with a tape measure. Once we had it at the right height, Craig clamped it securely in place, and then we just inserted a little screw just to hold it temporarily, making sure that it was nice and level. Then once we have everything leveled out and each post in place, we'll come back, just like you're seeing here, and add some carriage bolts to make these things nice and rock solid. So after Craig pre-drilled with a 5/8 inch drill bit, I hammered in some 5/8 carriage bolts from the outside, and we tightened them on with a nut and a washer from the inside. After we got 1 on each side, we removed those temporary screws and drilled out for a second carriage bolt right above the first one, again on each side. Now those upper posts, handrail things, are in there very secure. Hopefully secure enough to support the weight of a bridge. And of course we did the same thing on the other side. Next, I marked out where we were going to run the cable for the actual treads of the bridge. I found what seemed to be a good spot, not too far down from our decking because we didn't want a big step, and I drilled a hole. Now the cable's not going to attach to the front of the tower. We're actually going to attach it to the back of the tower so that when the cable is tensioned, it's pulling the board onto the tower, unlike the board on the front where the cable would be pulling that board off of the tower, if that makes any sense at all. Basically, we're going all the way through the tower to the other side because I thought that would be stronger. And I installed an eye bolt on that side. And yes, these eye bolts are rated for about 7,000 pounds, so I think they should be strong enough. After getting our 2 eye bolts installed on the smaller tower, I installed 2 eye bolts on the larger tower. Now, because these joists are going the opposite direction, I was worried that the tension of the cable would kind of pinch those joists together. So to prevent that, I stuck some blocking in the form of some of our 6x6 offcuts in between each joist so that it couldn't pinch. And then I hung on the eye bolts just to demonstrate how strong they are and how strong I am. And then I added one more piece of that 6x6 blocking right on that outer void to make sure that everything was nice and sturdy for when we ran this cable. I'm just screwing these blocking pieces in place from the outside and the inside, really any way I can get them to stay in there. They're not really structural, they just need to fill that void so nothing compresses. With all that blocking in place, it was time to thread our cable from the outside and hook it on those first eye bolts. Now we're going to hook the cable on the eye bolts on this side of the tower first every time, because we don't really need to tension them on this side. All of our turnbuckles will be on the other side because we have more room between the joists. For cable, I went with 3/8 inch cable, which from what I understand is way more than we need. And also, before we hook the cable completely up on both ends, we're threading on a few of these stainless steel carabiners. They're rated for about 480 pounds each, and we're just going to use these to connect our bottom cable to our top cable via some triangular little support cables. If that doesn't make any sense, just keep watching the video. It'll all come together in the end. With our first cable hooked securely to the eye bolt on the other side, we threaded it through the hole for the smaller tower, and this is where things got a little tricky, because we had to get this nice and tight before we secured it onto our turnbuckle, which is this thing. So the first thing I did was extend the turnbuckle all the way out so that we could tighten it down really nice and good. I hooked the turnbuckle directly to our eye bolt, and I bolted it in place. Unfortunately, this entire project involves working above your head, which is never any fun. Then, to get all the slack out of the cable, I attached a ratchet strap to the cable and to the turnbuckle, just using a little cable lock. Then all I had to do was ratchet down the ratchet strap, and that pulled the cable nice and tight. That way I didn't have to try and hold the cable tight and hook it to the turnbuckle at the same time, because the ratchet strap was holding all that tension for me. With the ratchet strap doing its job, I slid on a little cable lock and I tightened it down just enough to hold the cable. I then moved the ratchet strap to the end of the cable that was already threaded through the turnbuckle, loosened that cable lock, and then using the ratchet strap, I ratcheted it down one more time, and this pulled our cable almost as tight as we needed to, and we hadn't even used that turnbuckle yet. You always want to save the turnbuckle for a last resort, because it stinks to run cable and then run out of turns on that turnbuckle and it's still loose. Next, we needed to test the strength of the cable. And since I was the heaviest thing around for miles, I hung myself from it like a good piece of dry rubbed meat. And what do you know? The cable did not snap, and neither did I. So we measured out another length of cable, and we cut it for our second run on the bottom of our bridge. When I'm cutting cable, I like to wrap a little electrical tape around right where I'm going to cut, because it helps keep the cable from getting all frayed and frizzed out and unraveling. In no time, we got our second cable up, and Ivor came out and took over the filming process.
Bridge, they're working on that rope bridge. Look at that, that's the treehouse. This is the stand. Those are the stairs that Ivor cut. That's the bird mouth truck. Bird mouth woodworking.
First rule in filming, never turn your back on the subject.
Gotcha.
Hey, this video? Yeah, it's sponsored by AG1 by Athletic Greens, which, if you don't know, is a nutritional drink. It contains over 75 different ingredients, including vitamins, minerals, probiotics, superfoods, adaptogens, all that really good stuff that your body actually needs, but you're probably not getting in your regular diet. And not only does it contain all that, they've made it incredibly easy to take. And let me tell you a little secret, it actually tastes good. A lot of these drinks, you taste one and you're like, oh, ugh, what is that? I actually love the taste of this. I would buy it at the supermarket just as a refreshing beverage. But not only does it taste good, it's good for you. This is how easy it is. It's just ridiculous. You just take a scoop of the greens, you put it in 12 to 8 ounces of water. I like to add in 1 little drop of their vitamin D, and then you drink. And it really is delicious. You know, I've been traveling a lot lately, and when I'm traveling, the one thing I don't want to happen is to get sick. And so I'm worried about my immune system. That's why I'm always taking these AG1s with me whenever I'm flying anywhere, because it's got immune supporting healthy mushrooms and vitamin C and zinc and all that stuff, so I can feel a little bit better that my body is being taken care of. So here's what you're gonna wanna do. If you wanna try adding AG1 into your daily routine, then go to athleticgreens.com/bourbonmoth. And here's the cool thing. Athletic Greens is gonna give my followers a free 1-year supply of their immune supporting vitamin D3 plus K2, along with 5 free travel packets with your first purchase. So just click that link down in the video description. Believe me, you're gonna wanna try this stuff. I literally use it every day now, and I love it.
So it was the morning of day 2, and it started like this. Ouch. That looks like it hurt.
Are you okay? Was that on camera? I hope so.
With our bottom 2 cables ran, it was time to run our upper cables or handrails, suspension rails, whatever you want to call them. So I measured up 36 inches on our post because that seemed like a good height for a handrail. I don't know, could be. And we threaded our next cables through our handrail holes. Now the trick with these is that to attach them, they have to come down at an angle and go through the deck and attach below. So how to do that? Well, the first thing I did was on the larger tower, I installed some more eye bolts, right about where I wanted those cables to come down through the deck and attach. This side was pretty simple. After I attached the eye bolts, I attached another piece of 6x6 blocking to keep this from pinching together. Then from down below, I tied a piece of nice bright pink string onto the eye bolt and I handed it up to Craig. Then I went up to the top deck, and using that string, I went from the attachment on the eye bolt up to the hole on our post. This gave me the exact point at which the cable was going to have to pass through the deck. So I marked where that needed to go. And using a Forstner bit at a little bit of an angle, I drilled a hole a little bit bigger than the cable itself. And I threaded the cable from our handrail through that hole down to our eye bolt, and I clamped it on with a cable clamp until it was nice and snug and my arms were burning. Then using our measurements from our first 2 handrails, we measured out holes on our second tower and drilled them in the same location, passing our cable down below. Now the difference is on this side, we have to be able to tension that cable. So we can't attach it directly to an eye bolt, but we still need it to come down at an angle. Enter these pieces of 1-inch galvanized piping that we had cut to length and fit just right between the joists. This allowed us to bring the cable down, wrap around that galvanized piping, and then go straight back into our turnbuckle and eye bolt. So with this whole setup installed, I once again hooked the ratchet strap onto the cable and tightened the cable down as much as I could before locking it in place on our turnbuckle. Then before we use the turnbuckles to get our cables really tight, you can see I added some little bracing in all the corners of that tower to keep it from racking as we pulled those cables tight. Next, we needed to cut all of the treads for our bridge itself. So I was down below chopping wood and handing it up to Craig. We had a bunch of 2x10 scraps, not quite enough for the bridge, so we decided to alternate 2x10 and 2x8 pieces back and forth, and Craig straightened them out with a piece of metal, I guess. And then finally it was time to run our cables attaching our handrail to our lower cables. This is the suspension part of the suspension bridge. Apparently there's some sort of math or science or engineering that, well, I don't know how it works, but this is supposed to support the bridge and make it more secure. So with absolutely no clue what we were doing, we started marking out what seemed like a good distance for all of our cables to connect. And then we took a length of 1/4-inch cable this time, and we locked it on one end nice and tight with a cable clamp. Then we just started threading that cable through our pre-strung carabiners. Remember those? Yeah. This is why we put them on, so we could run that 1/4-inch cable through them, up and down and up and down, and this connects that handrail to our lower rail and makes a nice, secure bridge. So I'm told. After we got all those cables run and tensioned to a point that seemed decent, it was time to attach all of the treads to our cables. And for that, we're just going to use these little 3/8-inch hose mounting bracket things. There's not going to be really any pulling force trying to lift those treads off the cable, so these are more just to keep them from sliding left to right. So I figured if we attached 4 onto each board, that would be plenty to hold them securely to the cable and keep anybody from falling to their death. And speaking of people falling to their death, pretty soon I had all the treads attached, and I think the bridge was far enough along that we could actually try and walk across it. I mean, sure, I wanted to make some more adjustments in the tensioning of the cable to get everything evened out and straight, but it was good enough to test. At least, I think it's good enough to test. And as I mentioned, I'm not going to walk across it. Enter my 95-year-old grandmother, Verna. She decided to come out and give us a hand in research and development. So at 95 years old, I made her walk up the stairs by herself. Nah, I'm just kidding. I helped her up. But don't think I'm going to help her across that bridge. She's got to walk that path alone.
Ooh, how about that? It moves.
A little bit.
Yeah. Oh, man. Would you believe it? It goes down and then it comes back up. Oh, that's good. Very good. I'm almost there.
Wow, she made it. I gotta tell you, I gave her chances 50-50 at best. Pretty soon, she wasn't only walking across that thing, I couldn't keep her off of it. She was bouncing and strolling along like a 85-year-old. All right, Grandma, that's enough, okay? We still got a few things left to do here, so get the heck out of here. Just kidding, Grandma. Love you. After the grandmother test was complete, I decided to add a little netting to each side, you know, for safety. And I played around with the tension of the wire and the spacing of the boards until it was perfect.
Hey! We did it! You know, I've built a lot of things before. I built chairs, I built tables, I built boats, I built tanks, I built cabinets. I've never built a bridge before. So, for my first bridge ever, I'm calling it a success. There's still a few things I want to tweak. Maybe the tension in the wire could use a little adjustment. I might add some more braces to this bigger tower just so it doesn't wobble so much. But you can walk across it, and that's what matters. So go find a span, a void, an emptiness in your life, and build a bridge across it. And the other good thing is, my grandma's still alive. Check the link down there for a bunch of products, all the little things we used on this. There's also a link to our Patreon page and a link to our website if you want to get merchandise. bridge. So cool.